I'm Dr. Christy, and this is Climbing Fish Parenting, practical parenting strategies in 20 minutes or less. I'm a psychologist and behavior analyst, and I work with exhausted, overwhelmed parents who feel like they've tried everything and nothing works. If you're listening to this while folding the laundry, hiding in your car, or wishing bedtime would just end already, you're in the right place. Today, we're talking about why most parenting advice makes things worse for kids who are wired differently, and why that's not your fault. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why typical parenting strategies keep failing even when you're doing them exactly right. What's actually happening in your child's brain in those moments where nothing seems to work, and what it looks like to shift from trying harder to trying differently. Ready to transform your parenting journey? Let's dive in. You're at the pediatrician's office because your child's teacher sent home another note about behavior. The doctor asks what strategies you've tried, and you start listing them. Sticker charts, timeouts, taking away privileges, natural consequences, reward systems, behavior contracts. You've tried everything the parenting books recommend, everything the teacher suggested, everything other parents swear by. And the doctor nods and says, "Have you tried being more consistent?" And something inside you breaks a little bit. Because yes, you've tried being consistent. You've been so consistent, you could set a clock by your routines. The problem isn't consistency. The problem is that none of it is working. So you try harder. You read more books. You follow more Instagram accounts. You listen to more podcasts. And every single one of them has the same message. If it's not working, you're not doing it right. You need to be firmer, or gentler, or more structured, or more flexible, or more consistent, or more creative. And you're standing there thinking, I am doing it right. I'm doing everything they're telling me to do. So why isn't it working? Here's what I need you to hear. It's not working because the advice wasn't designed for your child. And this is the part that doesn't get said clearly enough. When a strategy doesn't work for your child, the default assumption in most parenting spaces is that implementation is the problem, that you're not being consistent enough, or firm enough, or calm enough, or structured enough. But there's another possibility that almost never gets named. The strategy itself might be mismatched to your child's brain. And if that's true, then trying harder doesn't fix the problem. It actually intensifies it. Most parenting advice, the books, the blogs, the well-meaning suggestions from family and friends, is built on an assumption. The assumption is that all kids are basically the same. They all respond to the same motivations, the same consequences, the same rewards. And if you just find the right combination of strategies, your child will fall in line. But your child's brain doesn't work like that. And when you keep applying strategies that were designed for neurotypical brains to a child whose brain is wired differently, you're not just wasting time, you're making things worse. Let me give you some examples of what I mean. Sticker charts and reward systems. This is the go-to advice for almost everything. Kid won't brush their teeth? Make a sticker chart. Kid won't do homework? Reward them for completing it. The logic is, if you make the reward appealing enough, the child will be motivated to do the right thing. And for neurotypical kids, this often works. Their brain can connect the action now with the reward later. They can delay gratification, hold the goal in mind while they do the boring task, push through discomfort for a payoff that's coming. But for kids with ADHD or anxiety or certain profiles of autism, sticker charts don't work. Not because the kids don't want the reward. They desperately do. But because their brain can't bridge the gap between now and later. The reward is too abstract, too far away, too disconnected from the immediate moment of struggle. So they melt down over brushing their teeth, even though they desperately want the prize at the end of the week. You're left thinking they're being manipulative or defiant, when really their brain genuinely cannot make that reward feel real enough to push through the hard thing. Just set clear expectations and consequences. If your child knows exactly what's expected and exactly what will happen if they don't comply, they'll comply. Predictable, consistent, that's the key. And again, for a lot of kids, this works. Their brain can process cause and effect in a linear way. They can think ahead, weigh options, choose the path that avoids the consequence. But for kids with executive function challenges, or kids whose anxiety spikes in the face of demands, or kids whose opposition is actually a nervous system response to feeling controlled, clear consequences don't help. They often make things worse because now you've added pressure and stakes to a situation where their brain is already overwhelmed. To be clear, I'm not saying that clear expectations and consequences are not a good thing. They absolutely are. I'm just saying that for your child, the consequence might not motivate them. It might escalate them. And you're left enforcing consequences that aren't teaching anything, except that your relationship feels like a battleground. Let them experience natural consequences. Stop rescuing them. Let them fail. Let them feel cold because they refuse to wear a jacket. Let them be hungry because they didn't eat dinner. Let them face the consequences of their choices so they'll make better choices next time. For some kids, again, this works. They experience the discomfort, connect it to their choice, and adjust. But for kids with poor interoception, that's the ability to sense what's happening inside their own body, or kids with working memory issues, or kids who can't plan, or kids whose anxiety makes it impossible to think clearly in the moment. Natural consequences don't really teach much of anything. They forget they were cold by the time you're trying to get them dressed the next morning, or they're so overwhelmed by hunger that they melt down and can't process that this is connected to not eating dinner 3 hours ago. Or the consequence is so distressing that it reinforces their belief that the world is unsafe and they need to control everything even more tightly. Natural consequences assume a brain that can learn from experience in a linear way. And when that's not your child's brain, you keep applying the strategy, hoping it will click, and you just keep creating more suffering without the learning you were hoping for. Do you see the pattern here? It's not that any of these strategies are bad. It's that they were designed for kids whose brains process information, motivation, and consequences in a typical way. When your child's brain doesn't work that way, when they have ADHD, autism, anxiety, or sensory processing differences, or any combination of things that changes how they experience the world, typical strategies can often fail, not because you're doing them wrong, because they're the wrong tool for the job. There's a quote that's often attributed to Einstein, and whether he actually said it or not, it captures something I come back to constantly. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. This is the core of what I teach, and it's why I named this podcast Climbing Fish Parenting. But if I'm being honest, it wasn't a quote that made this philosophy real for me. It was my daughter. She's wired differently, and watching her work so hard to fit into spaces that weren't built for her brain is what turned this from a professional philosophy into something deeply personal. I don't just teach this, I live it. Most parenting advice is asking your fish to climb a tree, and when the fish can't do it, when the sticker chart fails, when the consequences don't land, when natural consequences don't teach anything, everyone starts to believe there's something wrong with the fish, including you, sometimes including your child. But there's nothing wrong with the fish. The fish just needs water. What if the problem isn't your child? What if the problem isn't even your parenting? What if the problem is that you're trying to use strategies designed for tree climbers on a fish? Your child isn't broken. The strategies are mismatched. And once you understand that, once you stop trying to force your fish to climb and start thinking about building a pond instead, something shifts. Here's what I see in my practice all the time. Parents who've been told that if they just do the right strategy correctly, consistently, persistently enough, it will eventually work. And they believe it, so they keep trying. They keep enforcing consequences that don't teach anything. They keep offering rewards that don't motivate. They keep setting expectations their child can't meet. And they're exhausted, confused, and starting to wonder if maybe they're just not cut out for this. And their kid is also exhausted. They're confused about why they can't seem to do the things everyone says should be simple. They're starting to believe they're lazy, or bad, or broken. I want to stay here for a moment because I think this is the part that matters most. It doesn't usually happen all at once. It's quiet, it's cumulative. It's the third time in a week they couldn't do the thing everyone said should be easy, and something in their face changes. Not a meltdown, not a reaction, just a small flattening, a pulling back, a version of themselves that's a little smaller than the one that walked in the door yesterday. They stop volunteering answers in class. They stop trying the thing they used to love because the risk of failing at it feels like too much now. They start saying, I'm just bad at that, with a shrug that's too practiced for their age. And you watch it happening, and you don't have words for what you're seeing, only a feeling, a quiet, terrible feeling that something is being lost. That is what the wrong strategy costs. Not just the morning, not just the homework battle, your child's belief in themselves. And that belief, once it starts eroding, is much harder to rebuild than any skill. And the relationship between parent and child, it's fraying too, because everything feels like a battle and no one is winning. And you're both trying so hard, and neither of you can figure out why it keeps going this way. This is what happens when you keep asking your fish to climb a tree. Everyone ends up feeling like a failure. And the tragedy is that none of it is necessary because there's another way. Here's the shift I want you to start making. Instead of asking, how do I make this strategy work for my child? Start asking, what does my child's brain actually need? Because that question immediately changes what you're looking for. You stop looking for better control strategies and you start looking for points of friction. You stop asking, how do I get them to do this? And start asking, what's getting in the way of them being able to do this? Instead of forcing your child to adapt to strategies that weren't designed for them, what if you adapted your approach to match how their brain actually works? This is what building a pond looks like. You're not changing who your child is, you're changing the environment to match what they need. And when you do that, you'll be amazed at what becomes possible. Let me make this concrete, because I think it's easy to hear, match the strategy to the brain and think, but what does that actually look like on a Tuesday night when nobody's done their homework and everybody's melting down? The homework battle. The typical advice is set a consistent homework time, sit them down, remove distractions, and don't let them move on until it's done. Consequences if they refuse. Simple, consistent, predictable. But for a child with ADHD or anxiety, sitting down at a desk after 6 hours of holding it together at school, that's asking their already depleted brain to do the hardest thing at the moment when they have the least capacity to do it. Here's what I mean when I say that. There are two different things happening by the time your child walks through the door at 3 p.m., and understanding both of them changes how you respond. The first is their working memory, which I've been calling the whiteboard. That's the active mental workspace your child uses to hold and manage information in the moment. The steps of a task, where they are in a sequence. What comes next? It has a size limit. And after 6 hours of school, it's been written on and erased over and over. It's not depleted because your child stopped trying. It's depleted because it's been in constant use. The second thing is what I think of as the tide, the cumulative weight of everything the day has asked of them, not just the cognitive work, but everything they've been managing through their senses, their emotions, their social interactions, every sound that had to be filtered, every frustration that had to be held in, every moment of anxiety about the schedule change or the group project or the look a friend gave them at lunch. That's not working memory. That's the background system that's been running all day underneath everything else. And when the tide is high, it shrinks how much room there is on the whiteboard to begin with. The two are connected, but they're not the same thing. And both of them matter when you're deciding what to ask of your child after school. So when I say their capacity is depleted at 3 p.m., I mean both of those things at once. The whiteboard is nearly full, and the tide is at its highest point of the day. Homework right now isn't just hard. It's asking a system that's already at its limit to take on its biggest task of the day. What matching looks like instead. You give them 30 to 45 minutes to decompress first. No demands, no questions, just space for the tide to go out a little and the whiteboard to clear. You break homework into the smallest possible chunks with a short movement break between each one. You sit nearby, not to supervise, but to be the external scaffolding, the structure their brain isn't providing for itself right now. And you measure success, not by whether they did it independently, but by whether they got through it with their self esteem intact. Is that more work for you in the short term? Yes. Is it building something? Absolutely. The social situation, the typical advice push them to participate. Don't let them opt out. They'll never get comfortable if they don't practice. But for a child who is overwhelmed by social demands, who has been white knuckling through interactions all day and has nothing left, being pushed into more social participation doesn't build confidence. It builds dread. It confirms their fear that social situations are something to survive rather than enjoy. What matching looks like instead. You start smaller. You find one low stakes context where social interaction feels manageable. Maybe it's one friend, not a group. Maybe it's a structured activity where the interaction has a built in purpose, rather than unstructured free play, where the social rules are invisible. You look for their version of connection, not the version you imagined, and you celebrate the small moments, the brief exchange, the shared laugh, the tiny risk they took, instead of measuring them against what other kids are doing. None of these are magic solutions. None of them will work perfectly every time, but they all start from the same place. What does my child's brain actually need here? Not what should work, not what works for other kids. What does this child need right now? That's the shift. And once you start making it, you start seeing your child differently, not as a problem to solve, but as a fish who just needs the right pond. Now, here's where a lot of parents get stuck. They hear this and they think, but isn't that just making things too easy? Isn't that coddling? What about resilience? What about preparing them for the real world? And I get it. We've been sold this narrative that good parenting means making kids do hard things. That if we accommodate too much, we're not preparing them for life. That the real world won't make allowances, so we shouldn't either. But here's what that narrative misses. Your child is already doing hard things every single day. Things that are easy for other kids: getting dressed, eating dinner, going to school, making friends, doing homework. They're all genuinely harder for your kid. They're already building resilience. They're already facing challenges that most people can't even see. What they need from you isn't more challenges. What they need is support that actually matches the challenges they're already facing. And as for the real world is full of accommodations. Glasses for people with poor vision, ramps for people who use wheelchairs, spell check for people who struggle with spelling. The real world doesn't ask everyone to do everything the same way. It asks, what do you need to succeed? Your job isn't to make your child fit a mold that wasn't designed for them. Your job is to help them understand how their brain works and what they need to thrive. That's not coddling. That's teaching them self advocacy, self awareness, and self acceptance. That's giving them the tools they'll need for the rest of their lives. This week, I want you to try something. Pick one area where typical parenting advice has failed: bedtime, homework, mealtime, getting out the door in the morning. And instead of asking, what strategy should I try next? Ask yourself, what does my child's brain actually need to succeed at this? Not what other kids need, not what the parenting books say. What does your child need? Maybe they need more time. Maybe they need fewer steps. Maybe they need you sitting next to them. Maybe they need visual supports. Maybe they need less pressure and not more consequences. Maybe they need the tide to go out before you ask anything of them. Get curious. Stop trying to make the tree climbing strategies work. Start thinking about what kind of pond your fish needs. And here's what I want you to hold as you do: the question of whether you're building the right pond, whether what you're providing as support is actually helping your child build capacity, or whether it's just getting you through today. It's the question I've been circling all month. Most parents I work with feel it before they can name it. It's that moment in the school pickup line or after bedtime when the house finally goes quiet, when you wonder, did I just help or did I just make tomorrow harder? If you've felt that way, this is your next step. I'm doing a free live training on exactly this question, and registration opens this Wednesday. The link will be in the newsletter. If you're not on the list yet, go to climbingfishparenting.com/newsletter sign up and get there before Wednesday. All right, that's it for today. When parenting advice keeps failing, it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because the advice wasn't designed for your child. Your child isn't broken. The strategies are mismatched, And once you start building a pond, instead of asking them to climb a tree, you'll start to see what your fish is actually capable of. Don't forget, registration for the free live training opens this Wednesday. That strategy I just gave you, it's the whole climbing fish philosophy in action. Everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. Stop asking your fish to climb. Start building them a pond. That's where your fish actually lives. I'm Dr. Christy, and I'll see you next week.